Hello, and welcome to a little video about 6A. First, let's talk about all the definitions that we have. The first word that we learned was population. A population is all of the data. Now, it's not necessarily people, it's just whatever data that we're looking at. Is there bias to it? It's not really applicable until the sample is taken and the study is conducted. For example, we have all the cups, that would be the population, all cats, all Morton West Juniors. So it includes the word all. Now what a sample is part of the population. That's what we're going to sample. We're going to conduct whatever study of statistics that we intend. Now, is there a bias to the sample? Well, it really depends on the type of sample we take. It's impossible to survey all of the population. That's just too time consuming. So that's why we take a sample of it. Now, the way we take a sample is going to determine what kind of bias it may or may not have. An example of a sample is like asking 5 out of 10 students their opinion, because you can't get a hold of all 10, so you just ask those 5. All right. Let's talk about those sampling methods. First, we have a random sample. I like this one. This is where all members of the population have an equal chance of getting picked. So, this is less bias. You could even call it no bias. I have a philosophy, the fact that humans conducting experiments means there's going to be some bias to it. But that's just a personal philosophical thing. This is as close to no bias as I think humans can get in a sample, because we're just blindly picking pieces of the population to study. For example, given a list of all the juniors in Morton West, I randomly select 100 to ask a question. So I put all their names in a jar, and I just pick, and I shake it each time and pick out a name. Everyone has an equal chance. Then we have a convenience sample. A convenience sample is a sample that includes members of a population that are readily available, or they're conveniently there. It's convenient for me to ask the people a question. Does this have bias? There's some bias because it doesn't sample the whole population. Doesn't take into account, doesn't give everyone an equal chance, because it's just based on how convenient these people are, or the population is, to you. For example, asking people at a park what they think about raising taxes to keep the park taken care of. It's convenient to ask those people, but those people are more likely to care about the park than people who are not there. Yes? Yes. So there is some bias to it. We also have a self-selected sample. I like to think of it as you select yourself. What does that mean? It's volunteers. Is there going to be bias when there's volunteers? Yes, because we're only going to get responses from people who are actually interested, whether they think completely negatively or completely positively about something. They have interest in it. So it's biased because people who don't really care, their opinions aren't taken, and not caring is an opinion. For example, during PJ Masks, that awesome kid program that my nephew loves, and I like too, the program asks parents to call in to answer a survey. Now, the parent who calls in could be a parent that loves the show, just like me. Or it could be a parent who calls in to say, PJ Masks is the worst, and it had the worst influence on my child. Now, I can't ever imagine that happening. However, you're volunteering to answer the survey. People who don't care one way or another, that opinion is not taken into account. Next, we have a systematic sample. This is when we order the population in some sort of way. We could do alphabetical or by height, by whatever you want to do. Then you're saying, okay, out of this ordered thing, I'm going to count every 19th, and I'm going to pick every 19th, every 10th, whatever you choose, that piece of data. This actually has just a little less bias than the other two samples that we talked about, but it's pretty close to what a random sample is. This has a little bit more order to it, but it's pretty close to what a random sample is because it is taken from the whole population. Pretty much everyone almost has the same chance of getting picked, right? It's less than the random, but it's more than convenience or self-sampled. Here's an example. I take the white pages, that's what we used as phone books back in the day, and I call every 10th person to ask what they think about the new president. Now, there's an order to it. The white pages are usually in alphabetical order, so the whole population is there in those white pages, and yeah, I still only pick every 10th because that's just easier. Now, let's talk about the types of studies we can have. We can have a survey that's asking members of a population a set of questions. And it depends on the type of survey how biased this would be. Types of surveys could be yes or no questions, opinions, etc. You've done plenty of surveys in your day, I know that. Now, an observational study, I like this one. This is when we measure and observe members of a sample in such a way that they're not affected. We're just looking. And I think this is as close to no bias as we can get, because studies like this are, sitting in a park and seeing how many kids use the swings per day. I mean, it's a long endeavor. You're going to sit there from sunrise to sunset and just tally up the kids that use the swings. But nothing is affected. You're just watching and observing. Similarly to measuring plant growth over a period of time, you're just measuring the plant. You're not influencing it in any way. Okay, so those are all of our words. Now, let's do some examples and talk and use some of the vocabulary that we used. Okay, number 1. A candidate running for Senate creates an automated message that calls every third number listed in his county's phone book, reminding them to vote for him in the upcoming election. Let's see, what sampling method is it? Now, because it says every third phone number, this means there's a system to it. I'm going to call this a systematic sample. The population of this sample, the whole population, is the candidate's county. What is the sample? People in a county. And the characteristic of interest, what does he want to find out? Well, I guess the characteristic, what is the point of him doing this? And that is to remind people to vote for him. All right, number 2. A researcher needs to determine how many students in your grade eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. The researcher asks for 100 volunteers to fill out a survey. Aha. Okay, sampling method. Volunteers. That's a self-selected sample because you select your own self. Your population, that would be students in your grade. Oh, I need to correct something in that first one, but we'll do that after. Okay. The sample is 100 volunteers. I got carried away with number 1 and meant to write in the sample every third person. I didn't get detailed enough in number 1. Okay. In number 2, what's the characteristic? What is the point of this experiment? It's to determine how many students in your grade eat 5 servings of fruit and veg a day. One more example, we have Morty the Mustang is investigating students' study habits. He asks every student as they leave the library, how many hours each week do you spend studying? Sampling method. Well, Morty the Mustang wants to find out study habits, so what better place to go than the library? That's pretty convenient. Oh, I can never spell that one right. Thank you, spell check. Convenience sample. What's the population? Well, pretty much the student body. The students of Morton West. The sample that he's taking is students who are leaving the library. What does Morty want to study? Students' study habits / how many hours a week do they study? Let's look back at these 3 examples. Which one would be the most biased? The candidate who uses a systematic sample, the researcher who uses a self-selected sample, or Morty who uses the convenience sample? I'd say it's Morty because he is asking only students who are leaving the library. And generally speaking, if you want to have a good study time or a study group, you'd go to the library. Morty is excluding so many groups of people from the population, which is the students of Morton West. Some people find it better to study at home. Some people like to go to a public library. Some students like to study outside. And some students don't like to study. And we're excluding all of them from the sample. I'd say next would be the researcher because he's asking for volunteers and only people who care are going to answer. The least biased of these 3 examples would be the candidate for Senate because he is taking all the population of his county, but his phone book is organized, so he calls every 3rd. Sure, there's alphabetical order, which is some sort of weird bias if you think about it, but candidate is not excluding anyone from his county. He's just created a system to make it a little easier for him to place these automated calls. I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, remember to ask me or your other teachers. Have a good rest of whatever day it is for you. Bye.